last week we did have the 85th annual general meeting of the shareholders with Nintendo. And what happened there, where there were several questions that were asked from investors to the attending members, they say, members of the board, which is like Shintaro Furukawa, you have Miyamoto there, Shinya Takahashi, and so on. So there are many people there to answer questions, and there are actually some pretty good ones that were asked. Sometimes you get these investor questions and they're just not great. It's like, hey, can we get advanced tickets so we can get ahead in line at Super Nintendo World? Stuff like that. But in this case, there were 18 questions that were asked, and I picked out about 9 that I thought were worth going over. Again, not all the questions were great or even that interesting, but some genuinely were. Like, for example, they did ask about higher costs when it comes to development for a 4K system like the Switch 2, game key cards, and there was even a Club Nintendo shout out here. Yeah, so let's go over all of that today, guys. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you're new. So let's jump over here. This is the 85th annual general meeting of the shareholders. I will have this link down below as well, as Nintendo did publish the English version. So typically what they do is they don't put anything out right away, but some people are in attendance and are trying to at least catalog and just like write down everything that's being said in real time. But then we'll get the Q&A that's published on the Nintendo Investor Relations site in Japanese, and then eventually they'll publish an official one in English just to make sure there's no weird things when it comes to nuance or anything between the two languages that, let's face it, Google Translate tends to get wrong quite a bit. Okay, so let's go through some of the questions here, which again, I have marked down some of the more interesting ones, and that starts with question 3. It says, it appears that the supply of Nintendo Switch 2 is not meeting demand, especially in Japan. Is this due to insufficient production volume, or was the demand forecast inaccurate? So while we get answers at times that are very roundabout and don't really give a great response, I think the thing that's very interesting is to note what questions are being asked, because these are some of the top investors, and a lot of times will also convey their concerns to Nintendo. So they also note what's being asked of them, and that can at times affect some of their own views on these things. Like, oh wow, that's what the investors are really concerned about? Okay, clearly the Switch 2 is doing really well. Like right out of the gate, sold a ton of systems. We're expecting a number that we'll probably get in August. They'll probably be over the 5 million mark. All right, and that'll just be covering through the first month with the end of the fiscal quarter. So we'll have to keep an eye out for that. But a lot of it does come down to them just not being able to necessarily meet demand across the board everywhere. Now, it is easier, I'd say, this time to walk into a store and find a Switch 2 versus the Switch 1 even, or the PS5 or the Xbox Series. Still not easy necessarily. Now, the answer here mostly just recounts some of the stuff they did. For example, putting out applications and stuff as to interest, and they got back 2.2 million that had significant interest from applicants. So they kind of already knew they were in trouble in Japan in terms of the demand versus what they were able to supply. And they also discussed the drawings on My Nintendo Store. They say, we understand that many retailers also initially sold the console via drawing, but since last weekend, the number of stores offering the system for direct purchase at their storefronts has gradually increased, and they'll continue to strengthen their production and supply systems to deliver as many Nintendo Switch 2 systems as possible to our consumers. So in Japan, specifically, we know it's incredibly popular, which makes sense coming off of the Switch 1. And we can see the numbers. At this point, just through the first so many weeks, it's doubled what the Switch 1 did in that time frame in Japan. So yeah, they basically just can't make enough of these things right now in Japan. But also, again, kind of just across the world. And it's going to be like that for quite some time. Since they have a sizable install size on the Switch 1, they're figuring a good chunk will eventually find their way to the Switch 2. Let's also jump down here now to question 7, where they say, are there any plans to utilize Nintendo IP for children's education? Do you intend to continue developing products that stimulate creativity in children like Nintendo Labo, which use cardboard to make things? So I see Labo, it gets beaten down all the time online, which is interesting because I know online for a lot of what we saw, it was mostly adults using Labo. Labo is definitely something that was like out of the weird corner of Nintendo's R&D, because it was cardboard. Like they fold it up and you'll create things out of it. And I will say this, the engineers who made Labo are incredibly smart, because that it'd be so difficult to make something like that and then also have it so that kids could put it together, which was sort of the idea. Like it was definitely something that was set up for, as they mention here, sort of children's education, or just getting like kids interested in what Nintendo creates, right? That kind of creativity side. So they have nothing to announce at this time, which, I mean, I don't think they're going to stand up there and be like, here's Labo 2. But they do mention that Labo was an ambitious project, and they'll continue our research into such products that differ from conventional games. And that is something that I hope Nintendo continues to do, because, again, I know people were making fun of Labo and stuff. I still like Nintendo doing weird stuff like that, okay? When we get into this rut of a lot of stuff just being very similar and expected, it does make maybe Labo very jarring for people, but it's also, I think, a lot of fun to see what weird and kooky idea they can come up with there. So, you know what? Hey, if there's a Labo 2, I'll be curious to see what it looks like. Okay. Question 9. Some companies offer online streaming of their shareholder meetings or accept questions from shareholders in advance. Doesn't Nintendo have any plans to do something similar? They just say they're aware that companies have implemented the initiatives like live streaming, and that they'll continue to study how to best run our general shareholders meetings, ensure satisfaction of shareholders. I would love to see Nintendo live stream this, by the way, like the questions and answers, because Sony does it, and it at least makes it the guesswork out of some of these Q&As, or even some of the, like, sometimes someone will say, oh, they were smiling when they were answering it. Oh, they laughed at this, and those are moments that would be nice to see in context for how something is answered. Do you know what I mean? Because otherwise we're just kind of reading off of the paper, which we get the information, but there is some context and nuance that's lost from not having, say, a video feed or something. So I think it'd be interesting just to see that. And with like Sony, they just post it on their website and you can go back and watch it again. So I think that'd be cool to see Nintendo do that. So hopefully that's something they go, oh, okay, maybe that is a good idea to attempt something like that. Okay, question 11. How does the company expect the business life cycle of the Nintendo Switch to be? This is funny. So we see the Switch 2 just came out, right? And we're like, all right, what do we got for games? Like, we're not even necessarily thinking about immediately how long is this system going to last for. I think most of us assume similar to Switch 1, so 7 or 8 years, maybe more with cross-gen. And it's the investors are like, okay, how long is this going to go for? Like, they're already thinking about that. What's the move here? But they do say, Furukawa does say, Nintendo Switch 2 has just been launched, so it's not yet the time to discuss its life cycle. However, like Nintendo Switch, we aim for as many consumers as possible to enjoy it for as long as possible. They did. He also mentions that it is compatible with the Switch software, but he does make this interesting point here, and I've thought about this a few times with how long ago the Switch 1 came out. I think we tend to forget this, that it came out in 2017. So he mentions, if you consider the Switch, a child who was in first grade at its launch is now in intermediate school. So if the Switch 1 came out when you were in first grade, 8 years later or so, you're ninth grade, you're going in high school. Like, it's crazy to think how long that would span for a child going through school. It's like, if you picked up the Switch 1 in middle school, you may be in college. I guess you'll be in college when the Switch 2 is coming out. So the idea here, as they mention, is just the longer a platform can go, the more opportunities there are for consumers to pick up software, because you just kind of stretch out that time of purchasing. And maybe there are games you skipped on, but year 8, you're thinking, you know what, I'm going to go back and get Luigi's Mansion 3 because I missed out on it. And it's just, it's still going on, and it's still the current system. So that is a fair point there, but it was funny to see that brought up, because I've considered that before. It's like, that Switch 1 was around for so long that people were able to go through middle school and high school and start applying for college before the Switch 2 came out. Okay, question 12, which I think we're going almost in order here soon. Question 12, Switch has a higher price, but I was waiting for the pricing to be brought up. The floor at $450. It's a hefty price point. It is, and the way Nintendo likes to operate, this is the most expensive system they've sold out of the gate. But they say it has the higher price point than past platforms like the Family Computer. Okay, so the Famicom one is funny. It's like, hey, like that other system. What was it? Oh, yeah, the Famicom. It's like the one from the 80s? You could have just said the Switch 1, the Wii. It was just, okay. Anyway, I'm concerned that this might reduce opportunities for young children to engage with it. How will you address the issue? And this is a fair point, because, I don't know, parents out there right now, if you bought a Switch 2 Are you looking at that Switch 2 and going, hey, $450, got to make sure I get one of these for the 6-year-old at Christmas? I don't think so. With the way kids can treat a lot of these electronics and how the Switch 2 is set up, to me anyway, for more of a mature, older audience, it is kind of that thought of, they can stick with the Switch 1 for a while. And Nintendo seems to understand that with the way they're doing cross-generation right now, and that's kind of the way I'm looking at it. It's like, they don't need it right now. We'll see what happens when the Switch 2 Lite comes out. How about that one? Something about the Joy-Cons and the rails, I don't know. They messed that stuff up. So the Switch Lite all one piece does wonders there. So Switch 2 Lite, we need one of those for the kids. But Furukawa says, we believe the pricing of Switch 2 is appropriate for the gaming experience it offers, and what is most important is to provide entertaining experiences that demonstrate the value to consumers. To achieve this goal, we have incorporated various features into the Switch 2. It is true the Switch 2 has a higher price point than our past gaming systems. We are creating various opportunities outside of our gaming systems for young children to engage with Nintendo characters and game worlds, with one of the ultimate goals being that they will eventually play out on our gaming systems. We are closely monitoring to what degree the price of the system might become a barrier, which right now $450 doesn't seem like much of a barrier, but that's just because at this time, I do believe you're seeing the early adopter, the more hardcore audience, just buy in right away. It's going to be more so in year 2 and 3 when we get past those first 2 holiday seasons, how things continue to go. And by then, I would like to think that they have a cheaper Switch 2 out, and most likely a Switch 2 Lite. And then maybe we hear about a Switch 2 OLED years after that, right? You got to get the system cheaper for when you're like halfway through the generation and maybe some of the buying slows down a bit, okay? But here they're mentioning going outside of the system itself, the Switch 2, to be able to reach a younger audience. And I mean, it could be through the Mario movie, it could be through the theme park, it could be through applications on a phone that the parent maybe lets the kids use in the grocery store. It could be through merchandise. So, I mean, it's true in the sense that there are other ways to reach some of the younger audience outside of this $450 expensive, more premium looking system. But I do think eventually you just got to get the system cheaper. And I like to think that's a more short-term goal for them, a couple of years into the generation, kind of similar to that Switch Lite. Question 14 was, okay, although Nintendo has the basic strategy of expanding the number of people who have access to Nintendo IP, now that Switch 2 has launched successfully, I think a new basic strategy or long-term vision is needed. What are the company's thoughts on this? So again, as soon as the Switch 2 comes out, they're like, yo, what's next? What's the plan? Where are we going with this thing? And the idea is just to reach more people outside of just the console. Have you noticed the theme here, by the way? It's investors do see the Switch 2 as something that will make them money, but also at times kind of a barrier, right? Kind of a burden. Is like, all right, we're kind of limited to this. How do we go outside of it, though, and reach a ton of people? Okay, because they see Nintendo's IP as being extremely valuable, right? Very strong, but it's like you're kind of limited now, especially by the Switch 2 install size, which is going to take a little while to build up there. But Furukawa says, I'm just going to jump to the second part, where he says, based on our strategy of expanding number of people who have access to Nintendo IP since the launch of the Switch, we have pursued parallel development into mobile apps, theme parks, movies, and official stores. With the launch of Switch 2, there are already theme parks and multiple film projects underway, which that became a thing as we went through the Switch generation, which I think is important to note. We started to see Nintendo really branch out as that was evolving later on, like 2018, 2019, 2020, right? Now all that stuff is in motion, it's underway, and they're ready to roll with a Zelda movie coming up, a Mario movie, they have theme parks all over the place, there's a Nintendo museum. So in their mind, they say, for the time being, we'll focus all our efforts on expanding the user base of the newly launched Switch 2. At the same time, we'll continue to increase the number of Nintendo fans through our other initiatives and focus on building long-term positive relationships with our consumers. So it is definitely launching a different climate versus the Switch 1, which kind of did start at like ground zero just about, because the Wii U really didn't do much. Like, we weren't looking at the Wii U saying, oh, the Switch is going to launch with a ton of strength after that generation. No, it was from zero just about, right? So them be able to build the Switch 1 now, have that momentum kind of just be handed off to the Switch 2 right out of the gate. I think it makes it a bit more comfortable. Like, we have it set up, and we're just going to kind of build on and roll from there. All right, so question 15 I threw in here because it mentions Club Nintendo. See, they ask, are you considering providing exclusive merchandise and services for core Nintendo fans similar to the previous Club Nintendo or developing fan community services? Furukawa says, we are grateful that so many people support us as fans. We believe that our current initiatives aimed at expanding the number of people who have access to Nintendo IP, such as Nintendo Museum, are things that our core fans can also enjoy. Remember, Nintendo Museum has like this setup where you would actually have to go multiple times to experience everything. I guess in their mind, they're thinking, hey, we have like exclusive merchandise just about there. We have almost this weird customer rewards system set up there, but it's so like walled off and specific to that one place. And I say for our mid to long-term corporate value enhancement and sustainable growth, I feel it is important not only to increase fan satisfaction, but also to increase the number of fans worldwide and to build mechanisms to maintain long-term connections with them. We'll continue to explore better ways to do this. I will tell you a better way to do this would have been a reward system, and they could still sort of do it. A reward system that's tied into achievements at the system level. And this is the reason I was hoping Nintendo would have at least took a shot at it system level achievements, is because I think just the entire idea of that needs a bit of a push. I think it's stagnated somewhat mostly on the Xbox and the PlayStation. Really not a lot's happened from there. Like, we're pretty content. I'd like to see something disruptive there. And Nintendo tends to have some weird ideas sometimes. And that's the reason I'm a little disappointed they didn't go for it. I can still play the games fine, and you can go through them, and many of them even will have in-game achievements that are just part of it. But I just wanted to see something kind of give like the market a bit of a kick in the butt to get going a bit more here with some creative ideas around that. So we'll see if they do something like Club Nintendo, where, I mean, you can get, they had like wallpapers you get, but then you could also get physical items mailed out to you. It was an interesting idea there, but they shut it down. So maybe in the future they'll do something else with it. Okay, here's a big one. Actually, the next two I think are, I'm going to say, probably the best questions. Yes, the first one here, question 16. Nintendo Switch 2 has adopted a game key card specification, or game card specification called the game key card. There are opinions online that it is a hybrid between physical and digital software, and that the physical software containing no full game data is not very appealing. I am concerned that if titles from software publishers on game key cards do not sell well as a result of adopting this format, these publishers might move away from Switch 2. What are your thoughts on this? So first of all, whatever investor out there asked this question, great question. Very good question, because it at least got an answer that sheds some light on this. So, Furukawa answers, the game key card used for Switch 2 does not contain the full game data for the game itself. Instead, it stores a key to activate the software. Okay, he's explaining how all that works there. We're going to jump down. This is one of the new software distribution methods we have introduced to accommodate the larger game data sizes on Nintendo Switch 2. Compared to Nintendo Switch software can be released in various formats, and we will continue to work closely with software publishers on many fronts to ensure that they actively support our platform. So from what we've learned at this point, it was kind of the third-party publishers that were like, hey, these cartridges are kind of expensive. How do we figure this out? And this seemed to be the solution. It's like, well, we're going up to this faster read-write speed for these cartridges, because yes, the 64 gigabyte cartridges for the Switch 2 are faster than the Switch 1 carts. So we're only really going to have 64 gig. What else can we do? Game key cards. That was kind of it. The third parties were pushing for it, is what the word has been. And here they mention, okay, Nintendo clearly sees, I would have to say, that the game key card thing is not being received the best online on social media. Now, they would have the sales data sort of to track how it's doing on the open market itself, and there are still questions. I don't think we have enough data just outright for that. But clearly there's a stigma attached to these game key cards, and the idea being, if it becomes a problem and that games just don't sell because of it, you're just not going to have third parties support them, because what third parties want to spend? I mean, there are numbers of like $16 a cartridge for cost going around for the 64. Who wants to really do that? Because it doesn't make money. You got to give 30% already to Nintendo and then tack on another $16. Like, how much money are you really making when it's all said and done on a physical copy? Might as well just do digital only and drop a game key code. Not even a game key card, just a code in the box, like we're seeing with apparently WWE 2K25. All right. So as is mentioned here, Nintendo says they'll work closely with software publishers on many fronts to ensure they actively support the platform. And I think the many fronts thing would most likely be getting the cost of the 64 gigabyte cartridges down to where it's feasible for these publishers to use it. Now, my thing is, it's just never going to be as cheap as the game. I just don't think it will be as a game key card. If it is, that'd be incredible. I don't think it's going to happen. So I do feel like Nintendo, for big releases, let's say the next Monster Hunter game, okay? I feel like there are going to be some times where Nintendo's going to have to make a move and say, look, we'll help you out with the cost of this cartridge because we know that game is going to pull people in to this system that we're trying to grow that install size rapidly, okay? If Monster Hunter shows up and it's a game key card, I think there are going to be people who are still going to buy it because it's Monster Hunter. But there's definitely going to be that slight hesitation will be there. It's like, okay, I guess. It's one of those things where it doesn't help the image. But if it's all in one cartridge, clearly people become all of a sudden relieved about it, even if it's $70 or times $80. So we'll see with that. But yeah, interesting that we got a game key card question from investors because it seems like even they are paying attention and hearing some of the backlash online around that one. Now, the final one, question 17, is important because it has to do with the cost of development for what is now a 4K system for Nintendo. They ask, I'm concerned that the improved performance of Switch 2 will lead to higher game development costs, which in turn could result in higher software prices and ultimately a decrease in the gaming population. What measures are you considering to address this? So that's the other part of this. Naturally, pricing for games will go up as costs go up. And we've already seen it now with Mario Kart World. That's $80. I know people are like, I don't get why it's $80. The short answer is it's Mario Kart. Nintendo knows they're going to make money on it and people are going to buy it. And they also packaged it in for, $50 more for the Switch 2. So because it's $80 separate, that deal looks even better than if it was $70 separate. There's a lot of things to it, obviously. But the point is, as costs go up in the background, I mean, these are businesses. They go, okay, let's run the numbers. That game's $80 now instead of $70. Okay, and that's clearly a concern here from the investor because the more expensive these games get, the less people will be inclined to buy into it, which means there'll just be less people to then sell additional software or hardware to. So Furukawa says recent game software development has become larger in scale and longer in duration, resulting in higher development costs. The game business has always been a high-risk business, and we recognize that rising development costs are increasing that risk. Our development teams are devising various ways to maintain our traditional approach to creating games amidst the increasing scale and length of development. We believe it is important to make the necessary investments for more efficient development. We also believe it is important to develop game software with shorter development periods that still offer consumers a sense of novelty. We see this as one potential solution to the concern about rising development costs and software prices, and we will explore it from various angles within the company. I'm about to say something that's probably going to... people are probably going to recoil at it right away, be like, what are you talking about? I actually like the idea of Drag X Drive. Okay, hold on. Not the idea of the game itself, because the game does look kind of tedious. I'm like, how often is that going to be fun to basically move the mouse or Joy-Cons on either side in a mouse configuration? Maybe it's interesting to try out for an hour and then be like, okay, I had that experience. Then you move on, and the game just doesn't look very appealing. It looks bland. The characters don't look interesting. I hear all of that. I like the idea of the smaller game that's $20 that has an interesting concept attached to it. I do. Drag X Drive, not really the concept that I'm looking for, but I get it. And clearly that is not a game that took forever to develop. Do I want games to come out consistently from Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft, or do I want them to come out once a generation? Do I want just one game a generation? I'd prefer to have those. I still want those big games that Nintendo clearly is still doing. Like 3D Mario has been missing for a while. Obviously, they've been working on one. There's a big 3D Zelda game out there somewhere, I'm sure. Those kinds of experiences will still exist. But to get these smaller tier games, I think is still very important, again, for the cadence, the release schedule, and also, as being mentioned here, to sort of even out the big cost games. So when they can turn in something that, yes, is 60 or 70 bucks, and you buy it, you have fun with it, but you go, okay, that was a 10-hour game, that was an 8-hour game. It probably didn't have to be that much money, but I still enjoyed it, and it felt like a fun game to play through. Nintendo was clearly profiting good money on that game, because they'll come to the table and be like, hey, we sold 4 or 5 million copies of what Yoshi's Crafted World or something like that, right? But in turn, they will then also spend 6 or 7 years of development time for Metroid Prime 4, when, I hate to say it, I'd be shocked if that game made good money at all. Like, that's a game that's gone through turmoil in development. But stubborn Nintendo, one of the few times you can say where Nintendo's stubbornness actually worked out for consumers, stuck with it, and a lot of that's because, yes, they profit heavily on other things. So if they have to break even on a game that they really want to make sure gets out, they can do that. All right, and that's just kind of part of it. So I do think it is important to have those smaller games. Just maybe something a little more interesting than Drag X Drive next time. But those were actually all the questions I had picked out here with the Q&A. There's still technically another 9 or so on there. And like I said, I'll have this link down below, kind of buried on their investor relations site, but I'll just have a direct link to it so you can check it out. Let me know what you guys think about these questions, though, and answers down below in the comments for Nintendo with their 85th gathering of the shareholders. All right, game key cards, the cost of development around games, even Club Nintendo. A lot of interesting stuff in there. Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.